I thought it was a firecracker or some kind of senior prank. I watched them shoot people without hesitation.
People were getting shot all around me. They would shoot everything that moves.
They were laughing after they shot. It was like they were having the time of their life.
The spokesman for the local sheriff's office says there may be as many as 25 fatalities.
Isaiah and Matthew were killed right next to me.
Bullets struck students on the sidewalk, in the parking lot, on the hill.
She didn't get up. She just stayed crumpled on the ground.
They didn't hesitate.
It was no joke. It wasn't red paint on the ground. It was blood.
2 decades ago, the shooting in Colorado changed everything. Thousands of students have been affected by school shootings since, and right now it seems it's the day that never ended. My name is Hiti Shankayagari.
And I'm Suraj Morjani, and this is Columbine 20 years later. Today, we are going to address the casualties of Columbine, what has happened since then, and what we can do to prevent these horrid attacks.
We begin with a look back on that day.
I was 15 years old on April 20th. I found myself hiding behind a truck while seniors Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold sprayed bullets and threw pipe bombs into the parking lot of Columbine High School. When I heard the first explosion, I honestly thought it was just a prank. I looked up and saw those two in black trench coats.
I was a sophomore when it happened. My older sister, Rachel, dropped me off that day. We argued about leaving late for school. It was the last time I ever saw her.
I didn't know their names, but I'd seen them around. My friends and I would move out of their way in the halls. They scared us.
A teacher ran in yelling that there were 2 kids outside of the school with guns shooting other kids, and she was screaming at us to get underneath the desks. We heard the gunshots coming into the school and the 2 shooters getting closer to the library. They came in and immediately began to shoot other kids.
So I wedged my toes under the door and everyone behind me braced me to keep the door shut.
Eric and Dylan had no expression on their faces. They showed no emotion, not anger, not hatred, nothing. Then they opened fire. My friend Anne-Marie was standing on the sidewalk right below them. It looked like they shot her in the stomach. She doubled over and then fell on her back. She didn't get up. She just stayed crumpled on the ground.
They shot Matt and Isaiah. They were my friends, and they were dead. I was lying next to them in complete terror, paralyzed with fear. I thought I was going to be next, but then I don't know why they left the library. So many of my friends were still laying there on the floor.
It wasn't red paint on the ground. It was blood. They went inside. I ran for help as I could hear the gunshots ringing inside the school.
I'm Sue Klebold, and Dylan was my son. When I look back, I realize that my son's spiral of mental illness happened for about 2 years. 2 years I could have been getting him help. Months later, I found notes in Dylan's journal, dated 1997, that he had been cutting his wrists and wished for a gun to shoot himself.
I heard how some students had mocked and bullied them during their 4 years here.
It took me years to accept my son's legacy as a school shooter and not the boy I knew at home.
Sue's son and his friend committed suicide that day, but this did not end the suffering. Many of the survivors still struggle with fear and depression.
In fact, Columbine has stayed in the minds of Americans since. Many people have since copied these 2 killers, and we've seen an increased fascination with where it happened.
Since Columbine, the United States has had about 300 school shootings. Most of them haven't resulted in deaths, but hundreds of students and teachers are no longer walking the halls as they should be.
Hundreds of people enter Columbine High School every year. Usually, they are just over-aggressive tourists, but the numbers have grown recently leading up to the anniversary.
In an attempt to try to clear the dark history associated with Columbine, the district is now proposing demolishing the old school and building a new one nearby.
Today's school safety experts recommend tearing down buildings where school shootings take place, and we believe it is time for our community to consider this option.
There have been many copycats to this shooting. It's known as the Columbine effect.
Since Columbine, we have seen a lot of positive growth in keeping our schools safe. We have a lot more security in our schools, began holding lockdown drills. We made people more aware.
Columbine played out on TV. No previous school shooting had done that. There was an unknown of where the shooters were during the entire time it was being filmed. So I think people connected with Columbine more. Its attention increased people's fascination.
Unfortunately, the Columbine shooters have become a symbol for people who stood up for themselves and made a change. There have been 74 cases of copycat attacks that are eerily similar to Columbine. Many of them made trips to Columbine or even planned their attack on the Columbine anniversary.
So what do we need to do to prevent these tragedies from playing out over and over again?
After the break, we'll look at what has been done to make our schools and our kids safer. The day that never ended continues.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be like them. I hope these help.
The echoes of Columbine can still be heard to this day. Some say we need new gun laws or to put guns in schools with teachers, or even comprehensive mental health reform. So what is the key?
Everyone who we've talked to who was involved that day has done something to change this cycle of violence.
I have come to believe that the shooting was not caused by a want to kill, but instead a desire to die. It's about mental health and violence. Very few mental health diagnoses come with violence towards others, but 75 to 90% of deaths by suicide are linked to a mental illness of some kind.
Many of the Columbine survivors have held resentment towards the shooters, who extinguished the lives of their best friends and loved ones.
I used to fantasize what it would be like to get revenge on the shooters. If I had just 5 minutes alone, what I would do to them. And it started to eat me up. I started to think about Rachel, and I knew she would want something better for me. And I knew I had to let it go.
Craig has since done hundreds of talks about Rachel's story that have been shared with 25 million people and has participated in programs that help students realize their internal value.
I started to talk to the students about forgiveness and letting go, and how if they don't, it can really imprison their hearts.
Even after such hardships, Craig continues to spread his sister's message of forgiveness and hopes she would be proud of what he has accomplished.
American schools still are not doing enough to identify at-risk students to keep others safe from school shootings.
So bullying, is that the common denominator?
Aaron Stark was also bullied in high school. He felt lost, angry, and alone.
As a kid, I had violent parents. I was bullied for my weight and smell. I was labeled as the weird kid. And when you're told you're worthless enough times, you start to believe it. I think my mom wanted me dead, and I wanted to shoot up the school. I was tired of everything. I felt like I had no one to go to. So I had nothing to lose, right? And when you have nothing to lose, you can do anything. I thought the only way to end my pain was to make others feel the way that I did.
Shooters often tell someone of their intent to attack beforehand, but oftentimes the confidant says nothing. We need you to say something if someone makes a threat.
I had one friend, the friend who was there for me when my family wasn't. My friend saved me from doing something I would regret for the rest of my life. He simply talked to me and asked me if everything was okay because he knew something was wrong. He stopped me from risking my life along with maybe hundreds of other people. Simple acts of kindness will make a difference. So instead of looking at that person like he's a threat, look at him like he's a friend, because that could truly save a life.
I don't think death by suicide is a choice. A person's sense of truth is filtered by pain, leaving them feeling as if they have just one option. It must be recognized and treated before a life is lost. With Dylan, love was not enough. If every suicide were stopped by love, it would not be the second leading cause of death in Americans aged 10 to 24. But for love's sake, we must never stop trying to know the unknowable.
When Columbine took place, it shook the nation. It brought light to the dreadful concept of school shootings.
Now, this is all too common, and we're numb. One death is a tragedy, hundreds an abstraction.
We all hope and pray that one day, this day will end. Thank you for joining us.
Good night.